Hey, it's Todd from One Shot API. In this video, we're going to be experimenting with letting agents buy and set up their own domain name so they can establish their own business and brand presence on the internet. And to do that, we're going to be using namefy.io as our domain name registrar. They are an ICANN-accredited registrar, so you can use them exactly like you would use something like Cloudflare or Namecheap. The interesting thing about Namefy is that they do let you buy, sell, and trade domain names on the blockchain without having to go through a third-party intermediary. The other thing is that, as far as I'm aware, they are the first agent-centric domain name registrar in that they have implemented the X402 payment standard to let agents easily buy their own domain names using stablecoins. And we're going to be using one-shot pay to give our coding agent a budget. And as far as the setup goes, to give you a visual of what we're going to be doing in this video, I'm going to be using Replit as our agentic coding environment. And I like it because it also lets us host and do infra in the same place, so it's just really convenient. So we're going to be connecting the One-Shot Pay MCP server to our Replit agent. And One-Shot Pay is also going to not only give it a budget, but give Replit the ability to sign in with Ethereum to Namefy, so that when our agent does purchase the domain name, it can use sign in with Ethereum to configure the DNS records. And then also, so you know, under the hood, Namefy is actually using One-Shot API's X402 facilitator for facilitating stablecoin payments. A key thing that One-Shot brings to the table is that it works with X402 payments coming from smart wallets. Not every facilitator on the market right now properly handles signatures coming from smart wallet accounts. One-Shot API does, and that's critical for being able to pay with One-Shot Pay for our domain names. So with that, let's get into it. Let's go to Replit and connect One-Shot Pay and start searching for a domain name. Okay, so I've signed into my Replit account. So before we get into giving our agent a domain name and letting it set up DNS records, we need some kind of an application or site for it to set up the DNS records against. And for that, I've created a simple static web page for a site idea that I came up with called Subscribalicious. It's basically a crypto version of Patreon that I'm going to focus on in a different video for doing subscription payments with stablecoins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy or export the HTML from Stitch for my website design. I'm going to copy to clipboard. And then now that I've got this marketing page, I'm going to come back over to Replit. And I'm going to say, create a simple marketing site. Okay, so I'm telling Replit create a simple marketing site for an application called Subscribalicious and refer to the mockup that we got from Stitch. And so let's go ahead and let the Replit agent go ahead and start working on that. And while it's doing this, let's go over to One-Shot Pay and set up our budget we're going to give Replit for purchasing a domain name. And then we'll connect it to Replit. So I'm going to sign in with my passkey. We'll come over here to the profile button, click that, hit agent accounts. Let's create one. And I don't want to let it spend too much every day. So let's say $10 a day for domain names. And I don't want it to spend more than $100 on domain names. And I don't want it to bring my account below, let's say, $200. And the most I'm willing to spend per domain name, I'm going to say $7. And then let's hit create. And this is going to create an agent wallet for us. And then we're going to connect this wallet to Replit. Okay, so that agent account is ready to go. Let's check on Replit real quick. Just making progress on our static site. Let's give it a minute. Okay, it actually finished pretty fast. Let's check it out. So here's our marketing site. It pretty much matches what I got from Google Stitch, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and publish it so that we have the live site, and then that'll let us just finish up by buying the domain name and connecting the domain name to the app. So I'm going to hit publish over here in the top right. And when you're setting up publishing in Replit, pay attention to what you're doing, because if you ask it to give you too much resources, you might spend more money than you need for what you're doing. So like I'm hosting a static site. I need very little resources for hosting a static site. So for instance, it's giving me 2 vCPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. I do not need that for a static site. I'm going to bump that down to 1 vCPU, and I'm going to bump the memory down to half a gig of RAM, and this is going to make it way cheaper. And I don't need 3 machines. I'm going to bump that down to 1 machine and hit confirm. And then I'm going to hit publish, and I'm going to let this site publish. And then after that's out, we'll be able to grab a domain name using the Replit coding agent and NameFi with one-shot pay. Okay, so the publishing finished, and I can check out what it looks like on the public URL that it gave me. This looks great for what I need right now. What we're going to do now is we're going to set up the domain. So we're going to buy that autonomously with the Replit coding agent. So back over in one-shot pay, let's connect our new budget to Replit. I'm going to hit add to Replit. And it's going to pop open the authentication box. I'm going to hit test and save. And then authorize the server. Then be sure to connect to the right budget that you set up in one-shot pay. So I'm going to hit allow. And then if you scroll down, once you've connected it, you should see one-shot pay show up in your connected MCP servers. So that is now set up, and we need to guide the Replit agent now to NameFi. So NameFi has an llm.txt file hosted on their application, which is perfect for telling the Replit coding agent what it needs to do in order to check if a domain name is available, pay for it, and then manage it once we've acquired the domain name. Okay, this URL might change in the future, but for right now, the llms.txt file is available on api.namefi.io/llms.txt, and I've put that URL for you in the YouTube description, so you can grab it from there as well. But I'm going to copy this link, and I'm just going to give it to Replit. I'm going to say, okay, so I'm telling Replit I want to buy a domain name for this app that I'm working on using NameFi, and I said check out how it works from the location of the llms.txt. So hopefully the Replit agent will refer to that when it's figuring out how to search for the domain name. And I'm saying use One-Shot Pay's MCP tools for signing in when it's needed, and also for making X402 purchases. And then lastly, so I'll give it some autonomy. I'll say, try to acquire subscribealicious.com for my site, and if it's not available, try to buy something else that you think's catchy and appropriate for what I'm trying to do. So let's go ahead and let Replit start chugging on that and see what happens. Okay, so the Replit agent gave it a good shot, and it's actually kind of interesting to see what it did here. First, it read the One-Shot Pay MCP server to see what skills it had. So the One-Shot Pay MCP server lets it pay for things, and it also lets it get signed in with Ethereum signatures. So it figured that out. It is also able to get the directions from the NameFi llms.txt for how to interact with NameFi. And then it successfully found subscribealicious.com, and that was available for $10 a year. But if you recall, when I set up my budget, the budget was only $7 a year. So it tried to pay for the domain name and was hitting the per call limit. So One-Shot Pay is constraining what the agent is actually allowing or allowed to spend, which is good. That's what we want to have happen. We don't want our agent to go off and spend all of our startup money on just a domain name, no matter how much we might want to do that. So we kind of gave up, which I'm sure, this will get smarter in the future, but I'm going to tell it, look, subscribealicious.com is too expensive. Try to find maybe a different TLD that's cheaper and purchase it. So the .com TLD is too expensive. Try a different TLD that is within your budget of $7 and get in instead of subscribealicious.com. And let's see how it does with that. Okay, so Replit thought a little while, and it managed to pull it off. First, it investigated different TLDs that it could afford. So it found subscribealicious.lol, XYZ, site, blah, blah, blah. And it thought about it and decided to go with subscribealicious.xyz, which was $2, which was a great choice. And it was very excited about purchasing it, put a little exclamation point there at the end. and executed the purchase. It then used sign in with Ethereum to check the order. So it confirmed on its own that the purchase went through and gave us an excited note that, hey, your site is registered or your domain name is registered, as it returns now availability false on subscribealicious.xyz. And that's great. That's pretty awesome. It got the domain name. And also, if we go into One Shot Pay and come over to our activity, you see this external purchase. If we click on that, this is the payment to NameFi on that budget. And the justification was purchasing subscribealicious.xyz domain on NameFi for the Subscribealicious marketing site. So that's actually one of the nice things I want to highlight about One Shot Pay is that when your agent is buying things using the allowance that you give it, it actually has to justify why it wants to use the money. So when you go to look through payments in the One Shot Pay web app later, you can actually see what was the agent thinking when it spent that money. Now that we've got the domain name, let's go ahead and try to set up the custom domain name now that we've got it. So let's connect our own domain name. And let's actually say, let's see if the Replit agent will do this. I don't think it actually has the tool calls to be able to connect it fully automatically, but let's see if it can or not. So I'm going to ask it, can you now set up this new domain name as the custom domain for this project? Let's see what it says. Okay, so it thought a little bit and it replied exactly how I figured it was going to. It essentially told us we need to initiate the custom domain from the Replit UI. Currently, the coding agent cannot do that entirely by itself. It does not have access to that initiation process. So we're going to come over here and punch in the domain name that we bought. And then once that is done, we're going to tell the coding agent to autonomously set up our DNS record. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's type in our domain name we bought. We typed in subscribealicious.xyz. Let's go next. And it says, enter these two domain names. So let's copy those. I'm telling the agent, okay, put these two DNS records into NameFi for me, an A record on the root for this IP address and a TXT record for the root that points to Replit Verify. And I've also told it, let me know if you have any questions. So I'm going to start the agent, and I'm going to let it think for a little bit. Okay, so this was the first snafu we've had so far with the Replit agent setting up its own domain name. It seems to not have remembered what it read from the llms.txt from earlier, so it spent a long time searching for how to update the DNS records from API. So it did a lot of tool calls, and then eventually it had an error where it's saying the DNS right checks that the signer, the owner of the NFT of the domain name, which is correct. But what's happening here is that the signer key from One Shot Pay is a delegated signer to a non-custodial key held by the user, which is all done automatically, and it's having a hard time finding those two addresses, and so it's telling us that we can add the domain names themselves. So rather than doing that, I'm going to give it one more shot. I'm just going to give it the llms.txt directly and tell it to try again. So I'm just going to give it all of this information. Okay, so I'm telling it, I think you did not use the NameFi llms.txt instructions properly. Review them and then try it again. And let's see if this helps at all. So this step ended up being fairly challenging for the Replit coding agent, but it did pull it off, and I think it was mostly a case of the initial loading of the NameFi llms.txt. I don't think it did it properly. So this whole setup of the TXT records or the DNS records probably would have worked with way less thinking if we optimize a little bit the tool descriptions on One Shot Pay and also the skills for NameFi. Probably would make this work a lot faster. But let's look what it did. First, I said, to use the instructions, and, it tried a bunch of things, and gave up and said, hey, just do it yourself. It's really not that hard. It tried to tell me, just do it myself. It's not that hard. And I said, no, I know it works. The point of the exercise is to have you do it. Is the one-shot pay sign-in with Ethereum. Then it figured out, okay, I used the sign-in with Ethereum to generate the API key. And it tried a bunch of different stuff. And then finally, eventually it said, hey, you've got them now. There's your TXT records that the publishing tool wants. And let's try to link it now. So it's verifying the domain name, hopefully against our NameFi DNS records now. So while that's verifying, I want to show you a way to check your agent's work. If you're interested in doing that, you can open up a terminal and type the command dig and then the domain name. So dig subscribealicious.xyz, and if we hit that, there is our A record that we asked it to input, so that is correct. And if we ask it for TXT records, you can see there's the Replit verification TXT record. So we know that it did, in fact, create the DNS records in NameFi like we asked it to. Okay, check it out. So it is verified now, fully autonomously, even though we had to coax it along a little bit of the way. But we should be able to visit our custom domain name now and see our site live. So let's just copy that and open a new tab. And there we go. There is our fully agentically built marketing site from Replit. Again, just to recap what we did, we used NameFi for allowing the Replit coding agent to purchase its own domain name using stablecoins over X402. We used one-shot pay to give our agent a domain name budget, and we even saw the budget get triggered when it tried to buy a domain name that was too expensive. The budgeting tool did not allow the agent to spend that much money, so it had to find a different domain name. The only snafu here is that currently Replit does not let the coding agent initiate the custom domain name process. We had to initiate that ourselves, but the coding agent was able to update the DNS records in NameFi fully autonomously using sign-in with Ethereum. And so now our agent essentially owns its own business. It has the ability to update its code. It cryptographically owns its own domain name, so it can start building its own business and brand awareness. And essentially the only work now to do is maybe to optimize some of the skills and prompting around these external tools so that we spend less tokens in our coding agent for it to figure out how to interact with the domain name record and the sign-in with Ethereum tools. So I hope that was interesting. Thanks for watching, and watch out for the subsequent video to this where I finish building out the Subscribealicious crypto version of Patreon. Thanks for watching, everyone.